So once again, if we have a problem in the conduction of the sound, like a problem in the middle ear and the outer ear, we would call this a conductive hearing loss. But if we have a problem with the sensory cells inside the cochlea, we will call this a sensory hearing loss. If we have a problem with the neurons or the nerve itself, we will call this a neural hearing loss. Sometimes sensory hearing loss can lead to a problem in the nerve as well, and that way we call it sensory neural hearing loss. And this is very important to remember. If we have sensory hearing loss due to aging and we don't act upon it and we don't get hearing aids and keep that ear stimulated, eventually the little neurons in the nerve will be degenerated. And that might affect your hearing threshold, but more importantly, it might affect the speech discrimination ability. So we see more significant effect on the speech discrimination rather than the threshold when the nerve is damaged. And then it could be a problem in both aspects, like the conduction of the sound might be problematic and the sensory part might be problematic as well. In this case, we would call it a mixed hearing loss. So what is normal hearing? The human ear can actually hear range of frequencies. It starts from low pitches at 20 hertz and it can go all the way up to 20,000 hertz. And a common question that I have been asked all the time, when do we start losing our hearing? Surprisingly, we start losing our hearing in our early 20s, and it continues to affect us across our age. But we don't notice it really until we are beyond 65 of age, usually. The reason for that is at age 20 and above, we start losing these really high pitches like the 20,000 hertz, the 18,000 hertz. And these frequencies are not very important for the speech discrimination. So for communication and talking to others and understanding what they say, you basically need from 500 to 5,000 hertz. So when you start losing frequencies above that, you don't really notice it in real life because you don't use it a lot in communication. So we start losing our hearing early in life, but we start finding its significant effect later in life when these frequencies related to speech start going down. Also, our hearing can deal with wide range of intensities. So when we say 0 decibel, that's the softest sound that normal hearing people can hear. So 0 decibel does not mean there is no sound. It just means that it's the softest sound that normal people can hear. And then it can go all the way up to 120. So you can hear 120 decibels, but it's going to be very loud. And we say it's going to be painfully loud. So that's when you're going to take the headphones and throw them away and say, this is too loud, I can't handle it. So it's not very common that we are exposed to these loud sounds. And the louder the sound gets beyond 80 decibels, and the longer time you're exposed to these sounds, there is a bigger chance of you to have what we call a noise-induced hearing loss. So somebody can have hearing loss due to age, but also let's say the person works in a factory where there is lots of noise. So the noise will also make the hearing loss worse and worse and so on. And this scale here shows some examples of what these sounds are. So when we say whispering, that's going to be down here, like 25 dB. When we say normal speech, that's between 55 and 65 dB. The sound of the fridge is below 45. When we look at the street traffic and its noise, that's around 85 decibels. If you go to a concert, that goes up to 105, 115. The ambulance siren, that goes above 115. The jet engine, that's really loud, and that's when you're really far away from it, it's still beyond 135, and so on. So this is just to give you an idea what a decibel scale means. When we do your hearing test, we plot the results on a graph that we call the audiogram. And the audiogram looks like this picture. So basically we have two axes. The x-axis, this one here, represents the frequencies or the pitches of the sound. On the left side here, we have low pitches, sounds like ah, ooh. And then this side, the right side, represent high pitches, sounds like s, esh, f, f. And if you couldn't hear me, it's right here on the slide. So these are examples of high pitches. And even for normal hearing people, the F and the F sound, these two, are really tough and confusing. And we rely on the lip reading to differentiate between them. So they don't have a lot of energy, these two sounds, and usually they are confusing. So you can imagine how difficult it is for someone who has hearing loss at these high pitches. This graph shows the classification of hearing loss. So up to 20 decibels, if your thresholds are better than 20 decibels. So on this axis, we have the intensity of the sound in dB. The top is soft sound and the bottom is loud sound. So as you go from top to bottom, you're actually going from soft to loud sound. So anything up to 20 decibels, that's considered normal hearing. So if your hearing thresholds are above the 20, this yellow area, that's considered normal hearing thresholds. Up to 40, that's considered mild hearing loss. From 40 to 55, that's considered moderate hearing loss. From 55 to 70, that's called moderately severe hearing loss. And from 70 to 90, that's severe hearing loss. And anything above 90 dB, that's called profound hearing loss. Of course, the more we go down, that means the severity of the hearing loss is worse, and the need for amplification becomes more and more important. Now, the main question is, when should I consider using the hearing aid? Well, it depends on the person and their needs and what they feel actually in real life. If the 2000 hertz and below are usually preserved, people don't suffer that much in real life. They still miss some of the high frequencies, sounds like S and Esh and F and F. So if they have high listening demand, that's going to make it difficult for them and they pursue amplification. But if someone, let's say, is not exposed a lot to conversations, he lives in a quiet lifestyle, only one person talking at a time, he might say, I want to wait a little bit more. In either case, if someone needs amplification and decides to wait and not pursue amplification, we do highly recommend that you get your hearing tested regularly, because with time, even if there is some hearing loss, there is a chance that the nerve will start degenerating because of lack of stimulation, and that will make the speech discrimination more and more difficult. So we need to always keep an eye on that, even if you decide to wait on amplification if you have hearing loss. What do we call hearing loss due to aging? Well, it's called presbycusis, and it means that the older we get, the worse the hearing can get. And there are 4 types of presbycusis depending on the cause of the problem. So if we look inside the cochlea, this little thing here, this little spiral shaped thing, and we open it, we can find 3 little canals inside. If we look at the one in the middle and we magnify that, we will see this picture. So inside this picture, we have, as you can see, these blue cells with little hair at the top. And we call these the hair cells. And these little hairs, they move when the sound gets in the cochlea. And when they move, they cells. On this side, you have a wall called stria vascularis. It's full with blood vessels. And the function of this stria vascularis, like any blood vessel in your body, is to provide oxygen and to provide energy to the cells. So the first type of presbycusis is called sensory presbycusis, and that's when the damage happens to these sensory cells. And it's very common that this type affects the high frequencies more. There is another type called neural presbycusis, That's when the nerve endings, like these nerve endings attached to the cells, these black lines, are actually damaged. It's very rare to have a neural damage without a sensory damage. It's more common that the sensory damage would lead to a neural damage. And then we have another type called metabolic presbycusis. And this happens when there is a problem with this layer of blood vessels. So if there's a problem with the blood supply here, the basically the energy supply and the oxygen supply to the other components becomes um, problematic. And that's when damage starts to happen across the cochlea. And we see more of flat hearing loss at all frequencies in this type. And then we have something we call mechanical presbycusis. And this happens when the moving components, like this little membrane here at the bottom, this is very flexible membrane, and it moves with the sound. So if the characteristics of this membrane change, like its thickness, for example, or its elasticity changes, then its vibration is affected. And that causes what we call a mechanical presbycusis. And also, this can happen at different areas of the cochlea. It can be a combination of all of them. So sometimes you might have more than one problem in the cochlea. In either way, it's going to cause a hearing loss. It's going to spread more and more to other frequencies if the problem gets more and more severe. And at some point, the solution would be to protect your ears from loud noises to avoid that effect, but also to use amplification to keep the ear stimulated and you can hear well, and to prevent the deterioration in word recognition. This is a nice graph that summarizes the common effect of age. For females on the left here, you can see that the high pitches start to drop more and more as we get older and older in age. This graph only represents the sensory type of presbycusis. As I mentioned before, the metabolic and mechanical presbycusis can happen at other frequencies. So what you see here, the effect at the mid and high frequencies, this is more regarding the sensory type of presbycusis. On the right, you have the male data. And as you can see, males are getting worse hearing with the same age compared to females. This could be due to genetic factors and could be also to the lifestyle nature. It's really hard to isolate other factors of the lifestyle. Usually are exposed to more noise over the years. They usually do have hobbies that might be related to more noise, like hunting, for example. And it probably it's difficult to isolate all these factors 100%. And that's why you see that there is a difference in the data between males and females. So overall, males have more hearing loss at advanced age. The speech discrimination is basically, by definition, your ability to discriminate the words that are being said to you when the voice is loud and clear. So let's say that my voice is loud and you can hear all of its components and it's very clear in nature. How many words you can actually understand? If you have normal hearing or if you have a conductive hearing loss, then you should be able to understand 100% of what's being said. But if you start having problems with the sensory cells, think of the sensory cells across the cochlea as the piano keyboard. So if you have all the keys of the keyboard, you can play the note and hear it very nicely with all its details. But let's say that we missed some of these keys on the keyboard. You cannot play the same melody with the same clarity because you're missing some of its components. So think about the hair cells in the cochlea in the same way. So if we're missing some of these hair cells, even if the sound is loud and clear, the way the cells perceive and pick up this sound might be affected. And that's when we start seeing a drop in um, in the speech discrimination. So usually people with sensory hearing loss start getting 60 to 89% discrimination. If someone has the nerve affected, that's when the speech discrimination drops even more. So even if we provide loud sound, clear sound, the nerve might be deteriorated below 60%. So the sooner we provide amplification, we are preventing the nerve from getting deteriorated. We are avoiding this drop in discrimination. Now, is it reversible? So let's say a damage happens and the speech discrimination drops. Do you expect that it's going to be reversible if you use hearing aids? The answer is to some extent, yes, but not that much. So, for example, if someone gets poor discrimination and he's not using hearing aids, and if we fit the patient with hearing aids and he starts using them for all the time, more than 6 months, we start seeing improvements like above 60%, maybe 70, 75%. We're not going to see 100%, but we can see some improvement. The reason for that is that some of the neurons are dead, but some of the neurons are weak. So those weak neurons can be reactivated. The brain can handle that, but usually there is a limitation to that kind of improvement. So the best way to handle this is to avoid the degeneration in the nerve and to pursue amplification when needed as soon as possible. Because the longer we wait, the more degeneration that happens, and our ceiling of ambition for recovery gets reduced. So if there's a take-home message from this presentation, it would be to test your hearing regularly if you are older than 65. And if there is hearing loss, pay close attention to the word recognition score and use amplification at your earliest to preserve your word recognition abilities. So these are actually the useful advices that I just mentioned. I have them here in the slide. So test your hearing and pay attention to the discrimination and get amplification as possible. Now I'm going to move to the hearing aids and talk about them a little bit. Let's start with the most basic stuff, which is basically the styles of the hearing aids. I'm pretty sure that most of you are aware that we have in-the-ear hearing aids and we have behind-the-ear hearing aids. So in-the-ear hearing aids, they are just one piece that goes inside the ear. It can come with different sizes, can be really, really small. And in this case, we call it completely in the canal. It's usually very invisible. It can be a little bit bigger, which is visible from the side, and it's called in the canal. It could be a little bit fill in the ear, or it could be filling all the concave part of the auricle of the ear, which is called full shield, ITE, or in the ear. For those behind the ear hearing aids, they come also in different sizes. As you can see, it could be really big, and it's called powerful BTE. It goes with an ear mold, and it's used for profound hearing loss. It can be a standard BTE, which is a little bit smaller, but also uses an ear mold, which can be used for severe cases. And then you have mini BTE, which is a smaller style of behind the ear hearing aids. And this one comes with two configurations. The first one has a wire that goes in the ear with a speaker sitting inside the ear. This one is called receiver in the ear. The same thing, the same style, except that this time the receiver is in the hearing aid up here, and then we have a slim tube that delivers the sound in the ear. Now, which one is the best option? Well, there are pros and cons for each one of them, and I will highlight a few of these pros and cons, but we really like the receiver in the ear, this one here. This one here. We really like this one for many reasons that I'm going to highlight in a minute. And when these came in the market, they actually changed the market behavior. So if you look at this graph, Before 2002, the majority of the sales in the market were actually ITEs. So 80% of the sales were actually hearing aids that sit in the ear. Beyond 2002 until today, the sales of the BTEs increased dramatically. And nowadays, it's actually 80% behind the ear hearing aids. And the reason for that is in 2002 to 2003, the invention of the receiver in the ear technology, this one came in the market. So this was a game changer, and it helped a lot of people get very high quality of sound, very natural quality of the sound. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this one. Pros, because the speaker is far away from the microphones, we can provide more amplification with less chance of feedback. So do you know the whistling sound of hearing aids? So with this hearing aid, there is less chance of that whistling sound to happen. Like all BTEs, this hearing aid has two microphones that are well separated from each other. And having two microphones is not only important for directionality of the hearing aid, like ability of detecting where the sound is coming from, but also many of the signal processing inside the hearing aid depend on comparing these together. So for example, the ability of the hearing aid to cancel the wind noise depends on having two microphones. The ability of the hearing aid to differentiate between speech sounds and noise sounds also depends on having two microphones. It depends on the processing power as well, of course, but having two microphones facilitates that a lot. So if we improve the processing power in a behind the ear hearing aid, and we increase the same processing power in a CIC, for example, that has one microphone, really get you better performance. Well, both of them will improve with advancing technology, but usually the one with two microphones will give you even better performance, simply because the hearing aid can compare the input from different directions, and that will allow the hearing aid to identify the sound in a better way. Also, we like this style because we don't use any tubing, and the sound goes directly inside the ear. And this makes the sound quality better. So there's no tubing means there is no resonance of the sound inside the tube. And that will give you better frequency response, better quality at all frequencies. Also, because now the speaker is closer to the eardrum, what happens when someone talks to you and then they come closer to you? You can feel that their voice is louder. So with more proximity, the volume goes up. So that's exactly what happens here. When we have the speaker sitting inside your ear, we're getting closer and closer to the eardrum. And that provides us with more amplification with less distortion. So better quality at louder sounds. And the last thing, because it's really small and this is really slim, it's very light on the ear. And many people forget that they're wearing hearing aids when they use them, and it's very comfortable. Now, the only con with this style is that sometimes the hearing loss is too severe, like profound hearing loss, and this becomes less of an option, and you have to move into powerful BTEs or powerful behind the ear hearing aids. But the other one that is really a major thing is that this little wire is very delicate. So you have to be careful when you use the hearing aid to avoid breaking it. If you break it, it's not the end of the world. We can always replace it, but it can be cost. The other thing is because it has a very small dome and a very delicate wire, it becomes a little bit more challenging to put it in the ear. So let's say someone has other health issues, probably the hands are a little bit shaky, not very good control with the hands, then putting them in the ear can become a challenge. Most of the patients, with a week or two of trying, they become experts on using them and putting them in the ear. Fewer patients have severe control of the hands and they can't do it on their own. If someone can help them wear them, that would be fantastic. If not, then we go to other styles, like the stuff that goes in ITE hearing aids, because it's a little bit easier just to push it in the ear. So one important thing to remember, that this style, despite all of its magnificent advantages, it's a little bit more challenging to put in the ear. It feels more comfortable once it's in the ear, but you must have good control of your hands when you put it in the ear. This table here, you can always refer to it and study it on your own. Basically compares all styles of hearing aids according different aspects. So green means best option, red means worst option, and yellow means you can get away with it. It's in between. So for example, which one would be the easiest to put in the ear and to remove? Well, here the green says it's in the canal or half shell ITE. The reason for that, it's not too small. It's big enough that you can hold it easily with your fingers. And it doesn't have many components. All what you have to do is just to push it in your ear. So it's pretty straightforward and easy. Which one is the most challenging one to put in the ear? Well, as I mentioned, the slim tube and the receiver in the ear that I just showed you here in the picture. You have to have good control of your fingers to put it in the ear. Which one is easier to manipulate its controls? Well, the bigger the hearing aid, the easier that is. But nowadays, if you get higher technology, most hearing aids are automatic and they do many things on their own. So you have less need of actually controlling them. Which one is the most invisible? Well, completely in the canal is invisible. Also, the receiver in the ear hearing aid is pretty invisible, especially when you match the part that goes behind your ear with your hair color or skin color. It becomes really invisible. The wire that goes in your ear is really invisible. Which one provides you with more gain? Well, the bigger the hearing aid, the more gain, the more amplification it can provide. So CIC usually doesn't provide a lot of amplification, and a powerful BTE provides the maximum amplification, and everything goes in between. Which one provides you with good quality of the frequencies? Well, the ones that don't use tubing. For example, the stuff that goes in the ear or the one that goes with receiver in the ear, because we don't use tubing. So usually can provide you with better frequency response. Which one is more sensitive to wind? Well, the hearing aids, the CIC, because it goes completely in the ear canal, the microphone is shielded by your ear. So it's not usually affected a lot by wind. For BTEs, the wind can affect the microphones, but all new hearing aids have wind reduction algorithms that wind is no longer a problem. Which one provides you with microphone directionality? Behind the ear hearing aids, because they have two microphones that are well separated from each other. The in the ear hearing aids that have two microphones, they still provide you with some good directionality as well. Which one is less prone to be damaged? Well, the BTE with an ear mold or a tube is more durable. The receiver in the ear, the hearing aid itself is very durable, but the receiver can break easily and you have to replace it every year. If you handle or mishandle the hearing aid, there is a chance that you would break the receiver sooner. Which one is more compatible with wireless technology? Well, all of them are compatible. It's just the BTE hearing aids are more reliable. Like connections is with wireless stuff is more reliable. It's easier to clean. Again, the bigger the hearing aid, the easier to manipulate and to clean. Which one provides you with less occlusion, like you feel that your ear is less occluded? Well, open fit or receiver in the ear, because it puts only small speaker in the ear, can allow for more venting, more openings, and usually provides more comfort. Which one avoids feedback the most? Well, a behind the ear hearing aid with a full ear mold usually doesn't have a feedback issue. In the ear hearing aids, because the microphone and the speaker are close to each other, there is a bigger chance of having feedback or whistling. The receiver in the ear provides you more amplification, even if the ear is open, with less chance of whistling or feedback. Which one can be fitted on the same day? Well, anything that doesn't need an ear impression. So if you're going to get a receiver in the ear or a slim tube with a dome or a disposable earpiece, you can get that on the same day. But if you need a custom made earpiece, then usually we need to take an ear impression and we will reschedule you for fitting. Now, cost is mainly related to the technology level. And you can think of the technology as computers, for example. And cheap computers, usually they can't perform very well. They don't have good graphics. They might be slower. And when you use them, you don't really like them. More advanced computers, they become more efficient, faster, and they give you good quality images, good quality pictures, movies, games, and so on. So they can do more. And the hearing aid has the same ability. So think of the hearing aid like a computer. When it's weaker in processing power, it can't really handle that many situations that you might be in. It might be good in quiet or moderately noisy environments. But when your listening environment becomes more complicated, for example, many people talk at the same time, outdoor or indoor, with many people around you, with so many sources of noises around you, being in big halls like a church where there might be some reverberation or echo quality of the sound, that's when you will need more advanced technology, because the hearing aid now can identify the sound, analyze it, and process it differently. And we will have a few examples of these processing strategies in a minute. But I like this slide that I'm showing you because it helps you think of the technology level and how it correlates to your needs. So as you can see, we have many arrows. So we need higher technology level. So this is the direction of the arrow, according to all these factors as they increase. For example, if your listening demand is high, then you need a higher technology level. For example, I teach and I am usually on a lot of meetings. Almost all parts of my work are dependent on me being able to hear people. My demand is high, so I need higher technology to accommodate all these demands. Also, the listening environment complexity is really important. So there is a big difference between a person who sits in a quiet office all day and another person who is usually moving around, being outside, inside, big halls, small halls, talks to a group of people, different sizes of groups, small groups, big groups, and so on. So having that variety in listening environments, the more it gets complicated, the more you need higher technology. Also, the lifestyle. So some people like to attend concerts. Some people like to go to restaurants. Some people like to do certain activities outdoor. And these variations in lifestyle activities also make things complicated for listening. And the more active your lifestyle is, you also need more advanced technology. At younger age, for especially for those students at universities and schools, they might have academic demand, and that also requires higher technology level. Um, Very young kids, for example, they have a language demand. They need to learn the language, and that's why we need also higher technology level. Also, when someone has or started to have deterioration in the auditory nerve and word recognition score starts to drop, like recognition abilities of the speech starts to drop. The worse the word recognition ability it gets, the higher technology you need to compensate for that, to attempt clarifying the signal more and more for you. Also, the worse the hearing loss is, the less residual hearing you have, you need more advanced technology to also compensate for what's left. And also, when we need to enhance the technology because discrimination abilities of speech are deteriorated, we need to do more of oral rehabilitation, which is basically help you adapt new habits and new technology and new tools to make you hear better in every situation. It could be as simple as how you locate yourself in the room. Like you are sitting on a long table and you want to hear everybody, you might want to locate yourself in the middle of the table so that everybody's closer to you. You might want to face the person who talks. You might want to have better light in the room so that you can see their lips when they move and their facial expressions. Many people, when they talk to hearing impaired patients, they tend to raise their voice. But if you have hearing aids, you don't need them to raise their voice. You need them to talk slower and to articulate their speech better. So that's what you need to tell the people who talk to you, to articulate their speech better and talk slower. So in other words, talk clearer. Let's talk a little bit and briefly. This is very highly technical, but I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. Think about signal processing in terms of what do we want to hear and what do we want to ignore. Hearing is really more complicated than what we think. So when you just give it some thought, you will realize that hearing is really complicated. Let me help you thinking about this. You can ignore the air conditioning sound in your room and focus on me talking, or ignore the fan in the background and focus on me talking. That's your brain, that's your auditory system separating what you want to hear, which is the talker, and ignoring what you don't want to hear, which is like the example of the fan or the air conditioning. That's very complicated. Another complicated situation, when you have two people talking at the same time and you want to focus on one person and ignore the other. You can do that. And that's also a very complicated process that happens in your auditory system and so on. So basically, our brain does auditory processing all the time. It's trying to extract what you want from what you don't want. So hearing aids try to attempt that. So basically, when we have something like this is sound waves over time. The first thing we need to do is to identify the sound, then extract what we want, classify that sound that we extracted, and then process it differently. Let me put this in an example. We have speech and noise. We identify what's going on. We extract the speech. We figure out what's the nature of that speech and that listening situation, and then we process it accordingly. So let's say that this is a female voice, very high-pitched in a noisy environment. We extract the speech and we try to enhance it. We extract the noise and we try to suppress it. So basically, we're trying to separate the speech from the noise. There is a misconcept of noise reduction that it's always enhancing discrimination and ability to hear speech. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Let me try to explain to you the differences between them. Noise reduction by itself, what it does, whenever it identifies that there is noise in the environment, it just reduces the volume of everything so that you would feel more comfort. Does that really enhance speech when someone is talking in the noise? Not really, because it's just reducing the volume of everything. So if a cheap hearing aid says, oh, this hearing aid has noise reduction, that does not necessarily mean that you're going to hear better. It's going to reduce the volume whenever there is noise, which will make you feel more comfortable, but it's not necessarily making you hear the speech better. So that's good, but that's not the only thing we're looking for. What we're looking for is actually noise reduction and speech enhancement. So to enhance the speech, we have two main things to do that. Number one, if we have this speech signal embedded in this noise, just by looking at these two waveforms, you can see that this is random at all times, but speech going up and down with spaces between the words that you can hear. So this is a word, this is space, this is another word, this is space, and so on. And you can see that the volume goes up and down, according to the speech. But the noise is usually homogeneous. It looks the same over time. So what the hearing aid is trying to do is to identify these peaks, and we call them the envelope, like this red line. So it identifies the highest points, that we call them the maxima, and makes these peaks bigger. And at the spaces between them, we call it the minima, and makes these minima smaller. And that will give you more distinction of speech compared to the noise. So when there is speech embedded in the noise and you make these peaks bigger, you're actually making more distinction between the speech and the noise. Another technology which is present in advanced hearing aids and requires a lot of processing power. You know that, let's say that we're sitting in a noisy environment. And as you can see, I'm talking, but there are certain pauses between my sentences and my speech words. What the hearing aid is going to do, when there is only noise without any speech, the hearing aid will record that noise. And when I talk after that, it's going to take that recording and subtract it from my speech with the noise. So it uses the noise before I talked. So when I start talking and there is speech with noise, it will subtract that noise only from the speech and noise, and that leaves me with the speech. So let's say that this is time, and this was noise only. Then I started talking. So now this is noise and speech. What the hearing aid will do, it will take part of this that is already recorded. It will subtract it from this, and that will give you clearer speech. So it's doing that all the time, moment by moment. It's recording and it's comparing and it's subtracting, trying to separate the noise and leave you with the speech. So in this case, noise subtraction is different than noise reduction. Noise reduction provides you with more comfort, but noise subtraction provides you with more clarity of the speech compared to the noise. Noise enhancement provides you with more speech or clearer speech compared to the noise. Another technology, which is also related to the processing power of the hearing aid, it's called spectral subtraction. So basically what the hearing aid is doing, it's taking small chunks of time, like let's say every 5 milliseconds. And really quickly, the hearing aid will be analyzing that sound, identifying its spectrum, identifying what frequencies are present in there. What is this sound? And it will plot the energy of the sound over different frequencies. Then based on these different configurations of these graphs, the hearing aid can tell exactly what is this sound. And it's even taken further now. With strong processing, hearing aids can have, like one of the brands has 250,000 sound sample stored in it. And every small piece of time, it compares that sound to these stored sounds. And it identifies exactly what is that sound. And then really quickly, it applies an algorithm to subtract, to change, to modify this spectrum, to change the quality of that sound, taking parts of it out, enhancing other parts of it according to that sound. And to do that, which is called spectral analysis, and then processing that spectrum, all of that requires magnificent amount of processing power. And that's why expensive hearing aids that have strong processing, they can handle that kind of stuff. So it's not as simple as just buying a hearing aid that makes signal louder. That's not how actually your normal hearing is functioning. Your normal hearing can pick and choose exactly what to improve, pick and choose what exactly to suppress. And that's what more advanced technology is trying to attempt using these technologies. So basically, the hearing aids, the new hearing aids, they can analyze the input signal, they can classify the environment, they can identify exactly where you are in terms of sound. Like, where's the noise coming from? What is the nature of the noise? How many talkers are there? which one is closer to you, which one is further from you, which one needs to be enhanced, and which one needs to be suppressed. So classification of the environment, knowing what's happening around you, and then the nature of the sound, targeting the signal that you want to hear, improving that, and reducing everything else so that you can get a natural experience of hearing. And things changed a lot in the last 20 years. We used to think of amplification as making things louder, but now we're trying to make things more natural and more normal. And thanks to the technology we're getting, actually, we're living in a golden era of amplification technology. One technology that can happen and can be used for those who have really severe hearing loss at the high frequencies is to take these frequencies and shift them to a range that you can hear. So for example, if this is the range of the frequencies that you can hear, let's say that this part is inaudible for you. What we can do is to compress all the range into this smaller range that you can hear. We can cut this range and move it as it is to another or lower frequency. Let me show you an example to make more sense of this. We have two patients like these. The one on the right has hearing loss at the high frequencies, but still it's not too bad. So we can do a receiver in the ear hearing aid, and this patient should be happy because the sound will go, the low frequencies will enter naturally to the ear, but these high pitches will be amplified. Perfect scenario. But if you look at the one on the left, these two frequencies here, we have two arrows on each one of them pointing down. That means that this patient can't hear these frequencies at all. So if I amplify it, he's still not going to hear it. So what we can do is whenever the 6 kilohertz and 8 kilohertz enter the hearing aid will take them and switch them into a lower frequency. It will make it like, for example, 3 and 4K. And now your audible range. You can think of this like the piano keyboard again. I can play the same melody on different sides of the piano. You still can hear and understand and know the melody. It's just a different pitch. So this technology allows us to switch the melody, but preserve the content of the melody. So let's say that you can't hear these really high pitches. We can switch them to a lower frequency that you can actually hear. Also, one advantage of higher technology to have faster processing, stronger processing is very prominent in moderate hearing loss. Let me show you this one. So let's say that someone has moderate hearing loss, and we have a hearing aid that sound goes through the amplification into the ear, but low frequencies enter the ear naturally. Now, the sound that enters the ear naturally is going to be really fast because there's no processing. If we have a hearing aid that has really slow processing, then part of the sound entered quickly, the other one was delayed. When it's delayed, the waveforms will be misaligned. So when they interact with each other inside the ear canal, they will have this peaky shape. And let me tell you this, we don't like peaky shapes. We don't like frequency responses that look like peaky with peaks. That's usually perceived as bad quality of sound. So what we need in this case is really fast processing, where the sound that entered directly and the sound that was amplified and then entered through the hearing aid will not be delayed that much, so that when it's added up together, they will be aligned perfectly and you will get smoother frequency response. You will get better quality of the sound. The last thing that I want to highlight before we start the questions and answers is basically the advantages of having two ears. Many people in the past used to think, even if I have hearing loss in both ears, I want to get one hearing aid, because they didn't realize the importance of having two ears working together. And we still have some patients that come to us and say, I know that I have hearing loss in both ears, but I have this amount of money. I want to get the best hearing aid on one side with this amount of money. Believe it or not, divide the same amount on 2 hearing aids and activate both ears can give you better results whenever you need 2 hearing aids. So if you need 2 hearing aids, we would definitely go with fitting both sides. The reason for that is what I just mentioned before as examples of active listenings. Like you can't phase out the sound of the AC effectively with only one ear functioning. Your auditory system takes the input from both ears, and at the brainstem level and at the level of all the neural pathways that go up to your brain and cortex here on the sides of the brain. All that pathway, all what it does is what we call convergence and divergence of the neurons. And the purpose of that is to filter what you want to hear and what you don't want to hear. And that filtering is 100% dependent on the comparison between both ears. So when someone wears only one hearing aid, or when someone has unilateral hearing loss, it's more difficult for them to extract the speech from the noise. It's more difficult for them to understand speech when more than one talker is speaking at the same time. You need 2 ears to do that. So I summarized for you here few advantages of having 2 ears working together. So for example, 2 ears provide you with balanced hearing and natural sound quality from both ears. And even people with normal hearing, you rarely see somebody listening to music on one side. To enjoy it, they need to listen to both sides, and that's very common. 2 ears provide better understanding in speech in both quiet and, more importantly, in noisy environments. 2 ears improve sound localization. 2 ears provide better sound identification and smoother tone quality. So in other words, your auditory system can perceive the tone quality better when both ears are compared together. We call it neural redundancy. So more neurons are activated, and that provides you with better quality. 2 ears need to be activated in order to continue functioning well. So if I activate one side and the other one has a problem, like I'm telling the brain to focus on the good side, ignore the bad side. And what happens over the time? The bad side starts to deteriorate faster because the brain is ignoring it. And when it deteriorates, the speech discrimination becomes worse. So activating both ears, keeping both of them activated, is important to preserve your hearing and your word recognition ability, as well as all the cognitive processes related to that. Using both ears, because it provides you with all these advantages, it makes your listening experience less stressful and more enjoyable. If you have tinnitus in both ears, you need hearing aids in both ears to mask it and make you able to ignore it. That's all what I have for you today. And I know it's a lot of information, and I probably was too fast at some points. I just want to share with you the contact information of the Stockton Clinic and the San Francisco Clinic. You can call these numbers or visit this website, and feel free to call us if you have any questions. We have a fabulous team that will be able to help you at any time.